This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. Real Madrid overwhelmed Man City at the Bernabeu. An exhibition of finishing from Kylian Mbappe, with Vinicius, Bellingham and Rodrigo being brilliant behind them. It could have been more. City didn't lay a glove on Real. How will Pep's season play out from now? Also in the Champions League, another win for the Low Countries over Italy as PSV beat Juve. Won't someone think of Il Coefficiente? In the Premier League, delete as appropriate. Liverpool get a good point at Villa. Liverpool drop 2 points at Villa. We'll try to work out which one it is. There's a Premier League preview including Manchester City against Liverpool. Also today, some Cambridge United news that might be interesting for not just me, as they hire their previous two managers at the same time. As always, we'll take your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hi, Max.
Hi, Nicky Bandini.
Morning.
And from the Racing Post, Mark Langdon, good morning.
Good morning, Max.
Darren says, is Pep now underthinking things? Ian says, have Ineos bought Man City as well? Manchester City's 13th defeat of the season across all competitions. Now the most ever by a Pep Guardiola side in a single campaign in his managerial career. And Mark, this was so comprehensive, wasn't it, from Real Madrid?
Absolutely, yeah. I think from sort of Manchester City's sort of point of view here, the questions were, around Pep Guardiola. That would have been as chasing a defeat as what he could have had, I would imagine, because they've lost by more goals before. He was lost by more goals before as a manager, but it was the manner of the defeat where, like you say, they just didn't get near Real Madrid for just the entire 90 minutes. Really, the consolation goal at the end was merely that, and Real Madrid were in, it felt like second gear, and if they would have wanted to have sort of really stepped it up, they could. From Man City, the defending was poor, the midfield was non-existent. With Haaland injured, there was very little up front. They spent a lot of money in January. It's early, but certainly from the defence and midfield point of view, doesn't look like anything has changed to me. And Mbappe was electric, but even if he'd kind of just played sort of 6 out of 10 rather than kind of a 9 out of 10 performance, I still feel like Real Madrid would have won easily. And the lack of athleticism in that City side, it just quite embarrassing really at that level. From these two teams have played a lot in the Champions League in recent years, and like from where City were to where they are now, just didn't see that coming at all. Really, say this time last year.
We have, Barry, we've discussed this, and we've had correspondence from people who all know that Kylian Mbappe is really good, but have never seen him be really good. And I think last night he was really good, and we saw him be really good.
Yeah, he was outstanding. He's really hit his stride at Real Madrid now. He's scored 14 goals in his last 11 games, 28 so far in all competitions this season, which is not bad for a player who, everyone was saying, he's not performing. He's really letting himself down after getting this dream move. But as James Horncastle pointed out on BBC last night, maybe it's a case that he was so up for this move because has wanted it all his life, that because he was obsessed with Real Madrid when he was a kid, that he was sort of overwhelmed by it. So anyway, he's really got in the groove now. That was the 21st hat-trick of his career last night. And you could be really mealy-mouthed and say, well, he wasn't up against much. I felt so. When I saw that City lineup and I saw that Abdikadir Kushinov was
poor guy.
in at right back, I just went, oh, crikey, that's going to be trouble. Like, that is so unfair. I don't know, what was it, his third or fourth game for City? And I think his agent should have had it written into his contract. You cannot play my client out of position in that game that's coming up against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. But it was men against boys really last night, and some brilliant performances from assorted Real Madrid players. And City look so old and tired and slow and sluggish. I'd say Real Madrid probably couldn't believe their luck at how bad they were. And when Nico Gonzalez scored that tap in near the end, when Omar Mamouche hit the bar with a free kick, it was almost apologetic, the manner in which he tapped it in, as if to say, look, I'm apologising to the Bernabeu for taking a small bit of gloss off an otherwise easy victory. And I suppose there was no Haaland in the City lineup. Jamie Carragher has accused him of feigning injury, basically cowardice, which that's going to blow up or will have blown up by the time this goes out. Yeah, I'm not sure it was a wise thing to say. I wouldn't agree with him. I'd say Haaland, if fit, would have liked to play, but apparently he went to Pep yesterday and said he wasn't fit. So we'll find out more in due course, I suppose. But he's never really done much against Real Madrid, has he?
No, I mean, a couple of things. One, I think if you're not
Until the first leg.
Yes, that is true. He was very good in the first leg. I mean, just on Kuzminov, I think if you're not a right back, of all the places to be a right back, when you're not a right back, is up against Vinicius. And if Vinicius isn't there, Mbappe's there. I just think that's I think that's on Pep. I think that's sort of terrible. I mean, maybe he didn't have any other options. But I mean, Rico Lewis, I guess, might not have been fit. On Haaland, I thought, Nicky, and I don't know if this is true or not, there are those games against big clubs where he doesn't do anything and he has 4 touches, but he does occupy people. And if he's not there to occupy them, then those Real Madrid defenders, have time on the ball. Like he is a presence even if he's not doing anything. I know you can always read too much into players being better when they're not on the pitch when a team are bad, but I did wonder that about Haaland.
Yeah, it's a different. I want to temper this because I'm not for a second suggesting that there's any other winner if Haaland's on the pitch, but it is a different game if Haaland's on the pitch. Obviously, I think the threat he has, and specifically how he can unsettle that Madrid line was seen in the first leg. And yeah, he hasn't always done great against them, but he did in Manchester, and very nearly it looked like it was going to be a Manchester City win in that first leg until Madrid did the Madrid thing and woke up at the end of that match. I think it's actually kind of what I was thinking when Barry was talking about Mbappe just now, is because it is totally absurd that anyone is looking at him and going, oh, has he had a good first season? Yeah, of course he's had a good first season. He scored only 30 goals. But actually, in the end, we will judge Mbappe entirely. Not saying, I say we, I mean the football community at large, not necessarily us individually or the people listening to this, but the football community at large will judge Kylian Mbappe almost entirely on how he does in a very small handful of biggest games for Real Madrid. That's what will get remembered. Does he go on and win the big competitions there? Does he score the goals in the big games? And I was contemplating that as I was watching this last night because it was such a completely dominating performance. And I thought to myself, does this count as one of the big matches or not? Because I genuinely don't know, because it should. It should, because it's Manchester City against Real Madrid and the rivalry they've had and how close they've been in some of those games in the past. But this was such a one-sided game of football, and City was so far away from that good Manchester City we know. I just don't know if it's going to register in people's brains still as one of those big night performances that we demand from a player like Mbappe or like a Haaland.
Rodrigo was brilliant last night, Mark. Bellingham afterwards said he's so underrated. For me, he's probably the most talented and most gifted player in the squad. Clearly, he is not as underrated as Mark Albrighton, as we know, the most underrated footballer of all time. However, it is quite interesting. Obviously, if you're in a team where Mbappe, Vinicius and Bellingham are sort of wandering around near you, you're not going to get coverage. And maybe it helps him, but he is total dream. His balance is something else.
Yeah, I think he's not the most gifted player in that Real Madrid team. I'll dispute Bellingham's claim there. But what he does do is balances the team out. He works exceptionally hard, where maybe a couple of the other forward players, that's not one of their strengths. And I think in big games, he is sort of the person Ancelotti sort of nearly always goes to. And we've seen Real Madrid really unbalanced at the start of the season. It wasn't quite working with Mbappe and Vinicius, and Ancelotti was working it out himself. And one of the strengths, I think, of Ancelotti is that he's not wedded to an absolute system in terms of you must play like this. He just looks at the players he's got and then figures, how do I play to all of these guys' strengths. And not many managers, I would say, in the modern game actually do that. They've got this way of, we have to do this, and you either fit into it or you don't. And with Rodrigo, he just enables Vinicius and Mbappe to be slightly lazier out of possession. And what we've sort of seen in more recent times is that in defensive situations, they defend 4-4-2, and that means that Rodrigo will really shuffle back into a right midfield role. Bellingham on the left-hand side has to sacrifice himself. He probably doesn't want to sort of play left midfield out of possession, but he's doing it for the greater good of the team. And it will require, from Real Madrid's point of view, sacrifices from certain players to enable them to fit in as many gifted players as they can. And I'd also give a shout out to Asensio, the centre half, who defends so aggressively. And I always feel like Real Madrid are sort of better when they've got a player like that. If you go back to the Galacticos, it was the Zidans and Pavons was the nickname of that team. And then you had Nacho that just did it for years, really. And now it looks like they've found their kind of new Nacho. And while City didn't offer that much going forward, I really enjoyed his aggression at the back as well.
Every listener is thinking, I wonder if Mark Langdon likes nachos. And I suspect the answer is yes, even if there might be some. I mean, guacamole is the interesting question.
I try to avoid. I'll either ask for no guac or just pick around the guac.
Okay, yeah. I thought as much. Barry, City are capable, right? We saw that against Newcastle at the weekend. They're in the top four. They're in the FA Cup. And clearly good seasons, bad seasons are all relative. And this is a terrible one for them. But where do you think it'll go?
I don't think they'll win the FA Cup. And I think they will struggle to finish in the top four. They got 3 tough league games coming up. Liverpool at home, Spurs, who are something of a bogey team, away, and Nottingham Forest away. I mean, you wouldn't be massively surprised if they won all 3. You wouldn't be massively surprised if they lost all 3. It'll probably be somewhere in between. They've got a home game against Plymouth in the Cup during that run as well, which you would expect them to win. But they're so up and down, more down than up. I thought they'd sort of, after spending 200 million on new players, 2 of whom have looked good, one of whom is struggling a bit, Kushinov, although it's very, very early to write him off, and I'm not doing anything of the kind. And after that, such an emphatic win over Newcastle at the weekend, I thought, maybe they're going to get their act together now, but they were so bad last night. There was one stage when they were 2-0 down, and Real Madrid were just hogging the ball, fizzing it around hither and yon, and it looked like Real Madrid had about 18 players on the pitch. City just could not get near the ball. So I just don't know. I can't emphatically or confidently declare, they'll be fine, they'll finish in the top 4. I think now a top 4 finish would be a good end to the season for them, or maybe 5th would be enough.
Yeah.
All this has to be caveated by the fact that they could end up with an 80 points deduction and, blah, blah, blah.
I was just going to pick up on what Baz was saying there about how they looked, because it is not just about the scoreline. It is not just about, Mbappe scores a hat-trick against you at the Bernabeu, because that can happen to any team. That can happen to a really good team. But I was watching the replays on the second goal, and it just felt like on the ball that comes across, there's this mob of City defenders turning all at once, lost in the middle of this action, and it felt so much like when you watch a group of kids on playing in a playground who are just chasing the ball, running after it hopelessly with no plan to it. The whole thing just felt so structureless for them last night. I think that was what felt so striking about it. It's not losing. It's not that they got beat by someone good. The whole thing just felt like it didn't have a plan. And if there's one thing with Pep you always expect there to be, it's a plan. Sometimes in Europe, we've criticised him in the past for over-planning and overthinking and going crazy, but it just felt like everyone was out there like headless chickens last night.
Yeah. I mean, in that second goal, Kuzminov, first of all, is just sort of paralysed by not knowing what to do. And then Mbappe sends Gvardiol to Andorra, basically, doesn't he, with that drop of the shoulder. Mark, are you surprised that Pep has the stomach for a rebuild? Or because he says that he does. He signed this contract. Clearly, like they've spent a lot of money in January. But are you surprised that he is up for this? Or do we think he is up for this?
It didn't look up for it last night. There was an air of sort of defeat just around the whole sort of squad as soon as that first goal went in. I wonder if he hadn't signed the contract, whether he would sign it now. Maybe he didn't think things were going to be this bad. The drop-off has been astonishing. I don't see... This can't just be a Rodri thing anymore. I mean, Rodri will make them better when he comes back from injury, but maybe Guardiola's looking and thinking, well, Stones has just been injured all season. If we can get Stones back to full fitness, Diaz has been injured for a lot of the campaign. If we can get him back to the levels that he was before, but De Bruyne is not trusted anymore in sort of these big games, like physically maybe isn't capable of doing it. Was that drop off anticipated? I didn't see it coming this soon. I mean, I think we all knew at some stage De Bruyne would slow down. I didn't think it'd be now. He maybe thinks that there are some younger players coming through that he can get the best out of, and Haaland signed a long-term contract. And like, where else do you go? If you're looking at club football, he's not really realistically going to manage Real Madrid. He's already managed Bayern Munich. He's already managed Barcelona, and don't seem really going back there. So, it's that or a break, and maybe he doesn't want a break at the moment. Now, there's been a lot of talk about national team for Guardiola, but I'm not sure that really suits his style of coaching either. So I don't know if that answered the question really. I don't know if he's up for the fight, but I suspect to round it off, I think if the contract was put in front of him again, I'm not sure he'd be signing it quite so quickly.
Before we move on to the other games, Jude Bellingham's got a 2-match ban following that red card that we kept going on about FR and FU. But since we spoke about it last time, there's been this depressingly but unsurprising backlash against the ref, who's had threats and harassment towards him and his family. He expressed distress over the situation. And that is something that, everybody, players, managers, coaches, fans should be thinking about. On a slightly different tack, Paul writes in to say, a few years ago, my son yelled, "Play to the feckin' whistle," excuse my accent, at a teammate who'd paused in anticipation of the ref blowing up for some incident or the other while he was playing in the United States. The American ref clearly wasn't aware of this particular Irish phrase and gave him a straight red. So there we are. Let's go to PSV Juventus. They won 3-1. First time they've won a knockout game in the Champions League since 2007. And Barry, Ivan Perisic, no sign of tiring. Like, that first touch and finish for the opening goal is so good.
Yeah, this was kind of the Noah Lang show, and he was instrumental in setting up that first goal for Perisic. Sort of cut inside two defenders, suddenly seemed to be in just this vast expanse of green with no one near him. Fizzed a really, high velocity, low diagonal across towards Perisic, who took control of the ball at full speed. Wonderful, wonderful touch. Because it's Ivan Perisic, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he definitely meant that. And the ball sat up for him beautifully, and he just smacked a volley into the far corner. It was beautiful. And even though I saw him playing for PSV last week, I'd forgotten he played for PSV. a touch of the Jeffrey Schlups at Celtic. And yeah, he's still got it, hasn't he? Great. I'm going to guess he didn't play the entire 120 minutes, because he must be at least 47 by now, but great finish. And I didn't watch all this game, but I did see all extra time, and I don't think I've ever seen two sets of players more knackered by the end of extra time in a game. But Juventus obviously become the third Serie A side to exit the tournament in just over 24 hours, and Nicky probably has something to say about that. I don't know if it's a sign of a deep malaise or just one of those things.
Nicky?
I'm just feeling bad for poor Ivan Perisic, who I'm pretty sure is younger than anyone on this Zoom call. So, 36, I believe, is how old he is, and yeah, he did come off in the 85th minute. So yeah, it was magnificent, as was Lang, as Barry was just
God, what a
saying.
sad
I
world
mean,
where Ivan Perisic is a spring chicken compared to us. That is brutal, isn't it?
I think I look younger than him,
no.
though, even though I'm 14 years older.
You've run less.
I mean,
You've run less,
I'm going to
Barry.
say, yeah, it's true. Yeah, your stats. I think your running stats are lower than his.
Yeah, but I
would
appreciate
suggest.
I'm not as fit as he is, but I still think
Yeah.
he looks like he had a tough paper round.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, to the disastrous 2 days, Nicky, for Italian clubs.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, because I sometimes wonder if this is just a sign that you've been doing something for a long time, because I saw all of the heat and the fury and the desperation about how disastrous it is for Serie A that was going across social media, and again then the next morning in the papers this morning, and it's real. There's all this talk about it being this point of nadir, and it's not to dismiss, because I don't mean to be dismissive of it at all. It's just that I remember writing about Serie A's year zero in 2009. I just double checked it when that column was written, but I remember writing about that because there was no Italian teams that got through to the Champions League quarterfinals, and how this was the low point. Italian football has been ridimensionato. It's been redimensioned. It is not what it was in the late 90s and early 2000s, and if anyone thinks it is, then they haven't been paying attention for a very long time. This is still it feels like a desperate week, because all of the teams that knocked the Italian teams out, that they weren't losing to Real Madrid and Barcelona. They were losing to teams that you looked at on paper and thought, yeah, they should be able to find a way past that. And there's different threads, because I think I can talk through each of these ties, and I think each of these ties has its own dynamic, as football ties always do, that is not actually about the big picture. It's about individuals making good and bad decisions. It's about teams not being at the best of their points they could be. All of the top Italian teams are going through a rough patch right now. Atalanta were brilliant for a period earlier this season. They drew with Empoli at the with Cagliari, at the weekend. They're not in a good moment right now, whereas they have been at other points of the season. Milan should have won their tie, but Teo Hernandez is a massive idiot, and the whole team got punished for it. I mean, that just is the story of that tie. This one was actually, I thought, a really impressive performance from PSV, and I don't think that needs to get lost in the wash. But again, Thiago Motta hasn't got a handle on this Juventus team. There's already been talk of him getting fired weeks ago. It had sort of come back the other way recently, because they have had some good results. They did beat Inter, but they aren't a team that looks fluid and like it's all together. So there's individual stories. And then, yes, there is a big picture. Italian football is vastly poorer than it was. Financially, you cannot draw comparisons between where most Italian football clubs are and where most Premier League clubs there are anymore. It's a different world. And even the fact that Gazzetta dello Sport this morning was lamenting how, yes, this hits the coefficient, makes it less likely there's going to be 5 teams from Italy in the Champions League next season. They said, well, that's going to cost the league. That could cost the league 35 million euros or so. Can't remember the exact number, but it's about that. And I thought to myself, 35 million euros spread across the league in the Premier League is a drop in the ocean. It's a meaningless figure. Whereas in Italian football, it isn't. And that is the blunt reality of it. Now, there is layers and layers to that. And there are things that you could go back to 2009 when I'm writing about year zero that haven't changed, right? New stadiums are needed, and almost none have been built. That's simply been an area of almost no progress, because, and it's not completely no progress. Again, Atalanta have rebuilt their stadium, and that's been an ongoing thing. Udinese got their new stadium built. Obviously Juventus got the Juventus stadium built. Those things have happened, but across the board, it's still way less than it should be. The leadership of Italian football is so constantly beset by internal bickering that very little gets done in terms of promoting the league internationally. The fact that rights deals are being negotiated on the eve of seasons, and then even into the seasons for international rights deals, and then resolved, I would say, deeply unsatisfactorily, with in England, for instance, or in Great Britain, it's not got a major television partner. It's being broadcast on One Football with just a couple of games on TNT, with the CBS deal in the United States, which has been seemingly a good partner for them. There's been lots of positive noise about it. The fact they couldn't get that deal done until the eve of the season and for much less money than they thought they were going to get. It has been mismanaged horribly. And all of these things are true. I guess just these things didn't become true for me last night.
Yeah.
So I've been paying attention to this for a long time. It's been true for a long time. And so this sudden shock of, oh, these things aren't great. Well, yeah, they're not. And it's also possible to get carried away with that because of one awful week. Because just to remind everyone, Atalanta did win the Europa League last season, and they beat that Bayer Leverkusen team that everyone thought was the best thing since sliced bread comprehensively in the final. Inter were in a Champions League final 2 years ago, so it's not like there's nothing good happening. But yes, the big picture is worse, and it has been for a long time.
Adelim Lukman, after Gasperini said he's one of the worst penalty takers I've ever seen, took to social media to say, it saddens me on a day like this to have to write this statement, most of all because of what we've achieved together as a team and as a city. Being singled out in the manner I have been not only hurts but feels deeply disrespectful, not least because of the immense hard work and commitment I've always put in each and every day to help bring success to this club and to the incredible fans in Bergamo. In truth, I've dealt with many difficult moments during my time here, the majority of which I've never spoken about, because in my opinion, the team must always be protected and must come first. This makes what happened last night even more hurtful, along with our incredible fans. We as a team are hurting too with last night's result. During the match, the designated penalty taker instructed me to take the penalty, and to support the team, I took responsibility in the moment to do so. Life's about challenges and turning pain into power, which I'll continue to do. I mean, he's got a point, Barry, I guess. Like, it was funny what Gasperini said, and maybe you laugh about it later, but it would piss you off.
Yeah, it would piss me off. I think, and I'm an awful lot older than Ademola Lookman, I'd probably just suck it up, or else go and have a word with Gasperini in private afterwards. But yeah, it's a bit unedifying to have this, completely reasonable. I can see both their points of view, but it's a bit unedifying to have this airing of dirty laundry in public. But good fun for us, I suppose. I'm sure they're just completely different generations, aren't they? Gasperini and Lookman, and by the way, I've checked. Ivan Perisic didn't have a tough paper round. He spent his childhood working on his father's chicken farm, which is probably far more tough than a paper round.
God, I imagine it is. Yes, Nicky?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on Lookman and Gasperini because there is backstory there. Lookman was...
he was trying to get out, wasn't he? He was trying to leave, yeah.
Yeah, and Gasperini, I think, didn't take well to that at the time. There's been some tension between them through the season. There was a bit of a story around a substitution, I think it was against Venezia early in the season, which led to a fallout. And Percassi, who's has a figurehead role at the club, came back and tried to smooth everything over. And the relationship has been breaking down for a while, and I expect probably ends with Lookman being sold this summer if they can make that happen. And to me, it still seems like a very odd way to handle it. I think to air your laundry like that in public, like Gasperini does, seems very odd. But actually, as I was thinking about that today, it crossed my mind that it's not totally dissimilar to what happened with Papu Gomez, because Papu Gomez was Atalanta's best player at the time when their relationship soured and got chased out in the middle of a season. And to my surprise, because I was a huge Papu Gomez believer, the team got stronger. And there's been this long-standing comparison in Italy with Gasperini being a Sir Alex Ferguson type. And it did cross my mind again, this is exactly what Sir Alex Ferguson did sometimes. Flame out your high-profile player. Tell the world that they're the problem with everything. And somehow, even though it doesn't seem intuitive to me, come out the other side of it with your team stronger. But yeah, on a personal level, I think it's a horrible way to treat Lookman, and I feel really sorry for him.
Raphael Tolle must have been delighted.
Yeah, he must have been. Look, I'm conscious of time, so we're not going to go deep on PSG 7, Brest 0. Shame that Brest went out in that manner after they lit up this competition, but 7 different goal scorers. Could this be PSG? Yeah, well,
I think it might be.
But
I've been really impressed.
Oh, really?
With
Yes, Mark.
I agree with Barry in terms of being impressed, but next up it's Liverpool or Barcelona. So the draw gets tougher.
It does, yeah. Dortmund 0, Sporting Lisbon 0. I mean, it shouldn't. They just should have said, let's not bother with this. Absolutely nothing happened. Even if you watch the highlights, nothing happened in that games. You mentioned the draw there, Mark, and actually there are some. It's going to take place tomorrow, and it's kind of like there's sort of either ors, aren't there? But there are some absolutely fascinating possible games.
Yeah, there are. I mean, Real Madrid or Bayern will play Leverkusen or Atletico Madrid. So you just can't get a bad four sort of teams there. I think in terms of Inter and Arsenal, they'll be really happy that it's PSV or Feyenoord. I know what those two Eredivisie clubs have done this week, but it still would have looked harder, I think, on paper before the round. And Aston Villa or Lille will play Club Brugge or Dortmund. Dortmund is the one that Villa will, again, on paper, you'd want to avoid, but not playing well in the Bundesliga. And last night it was a very comfortable game for them against Sporting, but it's probably not as difficult as what it sort of feels like. And then that PSG against Liverpool or Barcelona is going to be great. And I think from Liverpool or Barca point of view, you'd rather play Benfica.
Yeah, all right. That'll do for part one. Part two, we'll do Aston Villa 2, Liverpool 2. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Villa 2, Liverpool 2. A brilliant game this, Barry, I thought. I feel like both sides will be disappointed not to win. I cannot work out if this is a good point for Liverpool or a continuation of their sort of not really blip.
Yeah, it is a sort of not really blip. I don't include the Plymouth FA Cup exit as part of a blip because that wasn't the Liverpool. It was Liverpool second and third string, pre-season friendly, 10 days after a major tournament lineup. It feels like a bad result for Liverpool, but Villa are a very good side. They're a very good side at home. And Liverpool have increased their lead at the top of the table by a point. But given the Darwin Núñez miss, the Jota misses, they will certainly feel like they should have won the 3 points and the game. But in the cold light of day, it is not a bad result, but they will feel they should have won it and they will feel they did enough to win it. But I, like yourself, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. It was a bit basketball-y and end-to-end, two good teams playing well, and there's certainly no shame in drawing away at Villa.
Yeah, that's the perfect description. I don't know if any team ever had real control of this game, Mark. And that, it's funny because the Jota miss is not as bad as the Núñez miss. And Jota probably missed more chances, but you just view them so differently because of who those players are.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Núñez one was definitely worse. It was.
Yes, no, it was. No, you're right.
There was at least a goalkeeper in the way of Jota's first miss. I felt like Liverpool, in isolation, this is not a bad point at all, really. It's because it's come on the back, particularly the Everton draw last week. But the performance was much better than what we saw against Everton or Wolves. I felt that Liverpool had good control of the game for at least the first sort of half an hour of it. They were. It worked well with Curtis Jones just on the sort of left-hand side there. Szoboszlai was making constant runs in behind, and Villa was struggling to cope with it until the goal went in, and then Villa's equaliser then sort of changed the dynamic of the match, and then Watkins put them in front, and from that point I think it is a good draw for Liverpool to be trailing 2-1 and to pull it back. But yeah, Núñez, I've probably been one of his biggest supporters. I always feel like it will turn for him, and there is a very top player there, but just the more you watch, the more you just think that there isn't. And I think to play up front, you need to have a certain calmness in front of goal, and he just doesn't have that. And there was even a moment when it was 2-2 and Liverpool countered really well, and Salah I think it was a long ball from Alisson, Salah had run through, he passed it to Núñez, couldn't sort his feet out, and then tried to play a ball to, I think it was Szoboszlai on the right-hand side, and he just passed it out for a goal kick, and like the Liverpool players were just sort of looking at him. And,
it's so sad.
Yeah, sort of last one to be picked in the playground type sort of look, really, of like, just not on the same wavelength maybe as some of the others.
The last man to stop supporting Darwin Núñez, Mark. This will be a hammer blow for him.
There's got to be a player in there, Max.
I agree.
I think Liverpool fans are running out of patience with him. I think they really want him to succeed, but I think that miss might have been one of the final straws hitting the camel's back as far as he's concerned.
Nicky, are you with your Arsenal hat on, staring at the league table again?
No, this is the thing. When we're talking about points gained and points dropped, there's this presumption that Arsenal, with no centre forwards, are going to win every game to catch them, and I think that's the fall down point for me. It was a really entertaining game. It was a weird night for me. I don't know if this has actually been mentioned since we started recording, but I'm away from home at the moment. I'm actually in Japan, and I was watching. Flicking from one game to the next because I didn't have as many screens available to me as I normally do, and so going back and forth between this and the City game against Madrid didn't feel as compelling after a pretty quick amount of time, but this game stayed compelling all the way through. I think as entertaining as it was, Liverpool were probably still the better team. They certainly conceded twice on pretty much the only two chances in that first half, didn't they? So I think even though Villa could have nearly won at the end, Liverpool didn't look like a team that's about to blow a lead to me. They looked like a team that played well against a good team and got some clinical finishing, meant they didn't get the 3 points, but I don't think they look like a team that's about to blow that lead.
I think if you're in Japan, you're duty bound to flick through the channels looking for me and Peter Crouch on the stupid people doing stupid things television show.
There's a chance, Barry, it's not repeated every day. I mean, we don't know, do we? What do you make of Villa, Mark? I mean, like, Rashford and Asensio started, does give them depth. You know, Daniel Marlon comes on, he's so close at the end. It sort of felt like Liverpool were hanging on at the end, only right at the end. But, like, that strength in depth should, I think, Mark, give Villa a real chance to push up the table.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest issue for them sort of in the first part of the season, was that Emery was looking at his bench and didn't feel like he had enough to change games, and their record after Champions League matches is not good enough really for a team that wants to get back into the Champions League next season, and that I think lends itself to this belief that fatigue has played its part in this season for Villa, as it has done for a number of other teams. They've had a lot of emotional games in the Champions League as well that maybe just taken more out of them than maybe it would ordinarily. I thought Rashford, there were the bits of sort of good play from him that maybe Villa didn't have enough of the ball for him to really sort of shine for the full 90 minutes. But I think that's probably unrealistic anyway against a team like Liverpool. There were some threats from there. I just think with Villa, the way that they play, and this was what Liverpool tried to counteract, nearly everything goes through that middle section, and Rodgers feels so important to the way that they play and try to create opportunities. And as Aston Villa get better and more respected, teams are going to look to sort of nullify that threat more and worry more about what Villa do rather than sort of their own game. And that might just be the next step for Villa, and having strength in depth on the bench is one way of changing matches. And they're still very much in the hunt for sort of Champions League. We think that Premier League will almost certainly get 5 spots next season. So they're in that mix, and that they're going well in the Champions League as well, and they're still in the FA Cup. So I think they can be reasonably pleased with the season so far.
Worth pointing out the moment where Emi Martinez really helped Tyrone Mings out, when Mings just lost, was sort of dallying with the ball, whichever one you want to choose. And then Martinez came out like a train. Was it who? I can't remember who was through. Was it Szoboszlai? But it was just an incredible bit of goalkeeping.
I think it was Núñez. I think it was.
You're right. No, you're right. It was Darwin Núñez. Yeah. Who's unlucky he wasn't up against a keeper who's not as good, because he'd have had a chance. I'm not saying he would have scored it. He probably wouldn't. Man City Liverpool on Sunday, Barry, is fascinating, isn't it?
It is fascinating. You would, on the face of it, expect Liverpool to win, even though it's at the Etihad. If they are in a blip, and maybe they are, Arne Slot reckons they aren't, but said he can see where people are coming from, then City could cause them problem. It depends which Man City turn up, and we just don't know which Man City will turn up. We have a fair idea which Liverpool will turn up, and I would expect them to win the game. I would also not be surprised if they didn't. So there's my incisive analysis right there.
No, it was. Yes, I've heard you say I don't know before, and I like it when you do, which is lucky for me, isn't it? What do you reckon, Nicky?
I was honestly thinking about, are we going to see Haaland and what difference will that make? And I don't actually know. I was trying to do a quick little squiz on the internet while you were chatting to see if there's any extra information about how likely he is to play in that game. Because I think without him, I'm a lot more sceptical that City could pull off something. With him, maybe there's a smash and grab in there somewhere. But there's no. We're not talking about, and this is what's crazy about this conversation. We're not talking about these as two equal teams. They're not. They're not two equal teams. Liverpool are a significantly better team than City at this moment in time, and so the expectation for me is that Liverpool win.
Everton Man United is an interesting one, Mark, isn't it? In the sense that I would almost be astonished if United got anything from this game.
Yeah, I always want, like, if Manchester United had stuck with David Moyes just through thick and thin, giving him
for this whole time.
That whole time, like, would they be in any worse a position? I mean, probably wouldn't be in a worse position. Yeah, I think it's difficult to sort of trust Manchester United to win any game, really, at the moment. The injuries against Tottenham clearly was a problem. I'm not sure how many of those players will be back, but even before that, the injuries, not enough of their performances have been up to scratch, and Everton have sort of been woken up by Moyes, and it's going to be a hostile environment for Manchester United to go into, and I'd probably fancy Everton, I think, to win the game.
Arsenal home to West Ham, Nicky. I mean, look, we've established the fact that this, do you think Mikel Merino will start up front?
It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, it feels like that's the point where I honestly don't know. It feels like no one is prepared for this, no one has planned for this, and how you make that attack look is a bit of a mystery to anyone. But it should be on paper. It's a good game, but I'm so sceptical about where the goal's coming from at the moment, and I find it hard to feel optimistic.
Yeah, I think you should be more optimistic. I think this title race is totally alive. I think Liverpool are in a blip. I know they're really good. I know they're better than Arsenal, but confidence, like we see it with City, like you see it with like Grealish and now Foden, and like confidence is such this sort of really unquantifiable part of the game. And I just think if Liverpool have a tiny slip, you just never know. I think Arsenal are capable, Nick. I think you should have some faith, or maybe you're just trying to brace yourself.
Well, it's funny. So my mum's husband is a Liverpool fan, and he has been telling me for ages that they absolutely are going to blow it. It's absolutely all going to fall apart. He's absolutely convinced of it. But I'm just convinced that he's doing the
double bluff,
trying not to the reverse jinx it exactly. But I don't know. Of course, Arsenal are a good team, and we should expect to win most of these games. It really has felt like, and it felt like even before some of his injuries, that scoring goals sometimes has been pulling teeth. And there's some nice stuff on the pitch, right? It's really fun seeing Ranieri out there playing and doing well, and seeing, even for me, it's fun seeing a bit more of Calafiori, for instance. It's fun seeing Marino come out of nowhere and score 2 goals. It just doesn't feel like there's anything that you look at the start of the game and think reliably that's where the goals are coming from with the team in its current state. And in the end, as we saw in that Villa-Liverpool game, scoring goals kind of defines games, doesn't it?
It does. Bournemouth will beat Wolves and stay 5th. Fulham play Palace, Southampton, Brighton on Sunday. Newcastle Forest, Barry, is an interesting one in the race for the Champions League.
Newcastle go into this one on the back of that, I would say, worrying now defeat at the hands of Man City last weekend. Forest lost against Fulham. And I think lost more heavily than the scoreline suggested. My concern for Newcastle about this is that it is only natural for their players to be preoccupied by the Carabao Cup final. And I think that may have been a major contributing factor to their defeat last week. It's up to Eddie Howe to tell them to, get rid of it out of their minds. That's easier said than done. On their day, both these teams are perfectly capable of beating the other. Newcastle are at home, so yeah, take your pick.
Yeah, I think that's a Newcastle won up Forest, didn't they? In a kind of when Forest won that really amazing run. And actually, Forest picked it up afterwards. Mark, Spurs go to Ipswich just with your Ange hat on. I mean, did you have a big tattoo of Daniel Levy out at the weekend? And two wins and 2 clean sheets for Tottenham. How are you feeling?
Yeah, slightly better. I think seeing a healthy bench was was the biggest pick me up that you're able to bring on Odebear and Johnson. But yeah, I'm not going to go for that. There's a clown banner, isn't there, of Daniel Levy? I won't be getting that across my back. You don't have to worry. I was at the reverse fixture when Ipswich beat Tottenham. That seemed to start a lot of the panic because around about that time, Spurs had just beaten City and felt quite good about themselves. It was certainly around that time when the sort of inconsistency started before they then just become consistently bad. I think Ipswich are a threat. A great point for them at Aston Villa last time out. With 10 men for so long. He's been mentioned a lot on the pod, but Liam Delap caused Tottenham so many problems in that first game. It's the first time I'd seen him sort of properly and really liked what I saw of him. And Ipswich have got a big battle on to keep him at the club at the end of the season, even if they stay up. But yeah, a good opportunity for Tottenham to get a third Premier League sort of win in a row, which would calm things down and set them up nicely for the Europa League, which is going to make or break their season, and I suggest Ange's future as well.
All right, that'll do for part 2. Part 3, we'll do any other business. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Home and Away says, has there ever been another instance in which 2 former managers have returned to a club at the same time? Bonus points if one manager replaced the other. This is the extraordinary announcement that I woke up to. George Ellick, our mate from Not the Top 20, sent me a picture of Cambridge United's post saying, welcome back. And it had our previous manager, Neil Harris, who buggered off to Millwall and left us in the lurch. And the manager before him, Cambridge United legend Mark Bonner, on the same picture. And I just thought he'd photoshopped this thing. I was like, why are you wasting your time? But Mark Bonner's come back as director of football. Neil Harris has come back as head coach. I don't know. I'm obviously totally invested in this story, Mark, but you did react in the WhatsApp group. Like, it feels like I can't work out if it's good or bad. The vibes are incredible. We're obviously rock bottom of League One. But a fascinating situation, especially because Neil Harris was like in the stands when Mark Bonner was about to get sacked. So there's just so many things happening here.
I think Dion Dublin to come back up front though as well, mate.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that sort of gives you a chance of fighting off relegation. No, it does feel like a staggering turn of events. When Gary Monk was sacked by Cambridge, I went onto the sort of X replies just to see what the Cambridge United fans were saying about it. I always like to get the view, and while I'd say 90% of it was just celebrating the fact that Gary Monk had departed the club, there was you get some like bring back Bonner, and then there was no, we don't want Bonner back. We need to move forward, and there was, I would say, probably more people in the we need to move forward, but this is sort of going backwards by sort of 2 steps. But what I would say is that Neil Harris is very good League One manager, and realistically League Two. I don't want to preempt relegation, but I think it's looking likely. And Bonner,
I think he's for that. Neil Harris, who did amazingly at Millwall. I mean, he is as good a manager as you could expect to get. The fact that I think I even wrote a whole column about what a snake he is, which I now have to rescind. Maybe an issue, but like a brilliant football manager at that level.
Yeah, I do feel like he is better at Millwall though than anywhere else. There is just something about Bonner Harris at Millwall that just makes sense compared to everywhere else. It's just whether Bonner is actually a director of football. I do think in the United Kingdom there is this kind of belief still in some quarters that anybody can, you just got to be a football man to be a director of football. And there is a lot more to it, and it's a very skilled job, and one that I think the best people are trained in and kind of work their way towards. So I don't know if Bonner has done any of that work, but that would be my only kind of querying concern for it.
So what do you have to do? You have to do recruitment, right?
Well, it depends.
I mean, that is the biggest
It depends.
role, or...
It depends. I mean, some have different responsibilities. I mean, I think that in itself is, some have different responsibilities. You could have complete oversight at the club, and that could be academy, it could be finances, it could be recruitment. Most of those people, including the actual football head coach, would report into you, and you kind of just manage all of those areas. I think is the general kind of vibe. There will be differences there, and it's just whether Harris and Bonner get on. It does, like you say, it feels quite strange that the last two managers are now sort of coming together. It's not quite sort of Kirbyshy and Grit, is it? But it's it's the modern day sort of setup, I suppose, of dual management.
I think it's Dan Ashford used to describe his role as being the central hub in a wheel, and the spokes lead out to men's team, recruitment, medical department, women's team, youth setup, academy, and then owners. So all you're overseeing all these various different departments. Obviously, the spoke that led to the boardroom from the Ashworth Hub at Old Trafford was broken. But yeah, that I think it's him that used to describe the director of football role as such.
And an expensive spoke as well. Man United have revealed it cost $4.1 million. The brief tenure of sporting director Dan Ashworth, encompassing compensation to Newcastle, Ashworth's severance package. The disclosure comes on the heels of a $10.4 million payout following the dismissal of Eric Ten Hag and his staff. The club has a 12% revenue decline due to missing out on the Champions League. Lost $27.7 million in the last quarter. Anyway,
just
Ruben
fire another tea lady.
Exactly. They should stop paying their tea ladies $4 million a year. That would really solve these things. But I mean, they make a mighty fine cuppa, don't they? Tricky Germany writes, as a Brit living in Stuttgart for 25 years, I love today's pod and hearing about you and Murray's German pub quiz experience. Very simple. Never mess with a German pub quiz, even if held in an Irish pub. Who knew? He says Germans getting arsy about their rules. Who knew, he says. But
a lot of people take pub quizzes very, very seriously. I mean, very seriously.
I mean, true. But I mean, I would say once you're in, you're in. And like cheating at a pub quiz is, I can't think of a worse crime.
Well, I can think of several worse crimes, but it is a poor show.
Yes. But it is a terrible, it really is. If you go into the toilet and someone's, Googling like the capital of Uzbekistan, you're like, come on, like this isn't on.
Well, I hosted and me and a pal set the questions for a pub quiz in Brixton a couple of years ago. Very well attended, and we managed to make it completely cheat-proof. So it can be done. It just takes work.
And how did you do that?
Well, you have various rounds, like an observation round. This is one I nicked from another pub quiz I'd been at years previously, where you just ask questions about, say, something about the exterior of the pub.
Okay.
We put up fake flyers for a DJ night around the pub.
Oh, okay.
And then before the quiz started, took them all down and stuff like that. So that an observation round. The picture round, they weren't celebrities. There were people who looked like celebrities.
Right.
That we got off some agency website. So it can be done.
Right, interesting. Daniel says, last night I was sitting on a chair with my 1-year-old son, milling about near my feet. As is his wont at that moment, he sat down but overbalanced, continuing his backward momentum, where he certainly would have cracked his head on the concrete floor. However, with somewhere between 35% and 65% of the grace and skill of Kaoru Mitoma, I was able to use my foot to gently catch him at the nape of his neck and ease his fall. As a centre-back in over 35s with the usual touch of a giraffe on skates, this was most unexpected. I do hope parenthood has granted to you previously unforeseen gifts of grace and skill. Swearing at the doorpost and possibly subconsciously your child at 3 a.m. probably doesn't count. Many congratulations, Daniel. Yeah, I mean, I must say, like, if you drop a jar and you control it on your instep like Matoma, it's a wonderful moment. I'm yet to have to control either Ian or Willie Rushden's head, but it's worth keeping on your touch just in case.
Who was the Spanish goalkeeper who put himself out?
Canizares.
Yeah, Santi Canizares trapped a bottle of aftershave on his instep and split his foot open and missed the World Cup.
Did Dave Besant did the same with salad?
Salad
free.
Yeah. But I don't know if he was Besant controlling that or just trying to knock it long. I mean, that's what we don't know, do we? Anyway, that'll do for today. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Nicky.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Max.
Cheers, Baz.
Thank you.
Football Weekly is produced by Tommy Stewart and Silas Gray. Our executive producer is Phil Maynard. We'll be back on Monday.
This is The Guardian.